While staying at my mum's with my pregnant wife, my younger sisters, who hate her, swiped her prescribed meds, turning our refuge into a battleground. When Sarah and I first moved in with my mum, I thought it would be a temporary refuge. Our lease had ended, and with Sarah's complicated pregnancy and the financial strain we were under, moving back to my childhood home seemed like the best option. Mum welcomed us with open arms, eager to help her future grandchild. It was a warm, sunny day when we arrived, the house looking just as I remembered it, if not a little more cluttered from my younger sister's stuff strewn everywhere. Sarah was exhausted from the drive. I helped her inside, and we settled into the guest room. The first few days were peaceful enough, despite the cramped space. My mum fussed over Sarah, making sure she had everything she needed. But Mia and Lucy, my teenage sisters, were another story. Mia, at 17, was in that rebellious phase where everything and everyone annoyed her. Lucy, a year younger, idolized Mia and followed her lead in just about everything. The first time they laid eyes on Sarah after our arrival, I could see the disdain in their eyes. They didn't bother hiding their feelings. "Why does she have to stay in my room?" Mia had protested loudly when we first arrived. Mum had decided it was best for Sarah to have the larger bedroom, much to Mia's dismay. "It's just until the baby is born, Mia," Mum had replied with a sigh. "Sarah needs the space and comfort." From then on, it was clear that Mia and Lucy were on a mission to make our stay as uncomfortable as possible. They constantly whispered behind Sarah's back, giggling and exchanging glances whenever she was around. It was petty high school drama, but it wore on Sarah's already fragile nerves. One evening, as we all sat down for dinner, Mia made a snide remark about Sarah's weight gain. "Are you sure you're not having twins, Sarah?" "Ah!" she sneered, not even bothering to disguise her disdain. "Mia!" Mum scolded, but the damage was done. Sarah's face flushed, and she excused herself from the table. I followed her to our room, where she was already in tears. "I can't do this, Jack," she sobbed. "I feel like I'm intruding, like I don't belong here." "You do belong here," I assured her, feeling a pang of guilt for putting her in this situation. "They're just being brats. They'll come around." But the days that followed only proved me wrong. The hostility from my sisters didn't let up. One night, Sarah woke up in a panic. "Jack, I can't find my medication," she said, her voice trembling. Her prescribed meds were crucial for managing her pregnancy complications, and missing even one dose could be dangerous. We tore the room apart looking for the bottle, but it was nowhere to be found. I couldn't help but suspect Mia and Lucy. Their hatred for Sarah had been growing more palpable by the day, and I wouldn't put it past them to do something so malicious. The next morning, I confronted them. "Did you take Sarah's medication?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Mia rolled her eyes. "Why would we want her stupid pills?" Lucy snickered beside her, but neither confessed. Without proof, there was little I could do except warn them of the severity of their actions. As the week went on, Sarah's health began to decline. She became more anxious, her sleep disrupted by constant worry. We went to the doctor, who confirmed that missing her medication was starting to have adverse effects. We got a new prescription, but the trust had been shattered. One evening, I overheard Mia and Lucy talking in hushed voices in the hallway. "Mum's going to kill us if she finds out," Mia whispered. "She won't," Lucy replied. "We'll just keep playing dumb." My blood ran cold. They had taken the meds. There was no doubt now. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. How could they be so heartless? That night, I couldn't hold back any longer. I confronted them again, this time in front of my mum. "They took Sarah's medication," I said, my voice shaking with anger. They admitted it. Mia and Lucy's faces went pale. Mum looked between us, stunned. "Is this true?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Mia opened her mouth to deny it, but the guilt was written all over her face. Lucy just looked down at her feet, silent. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I shouted, unable to contain my fury. "You've put Sarah and the baby at risk." Mum was horrified. She turned to Mia and Lucy, her face a mix of anger and disappointment. "How could you be so cruel?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The confrontation ended with Mia and Lucy storming off to their rooms, but the damage was done. Sarah's trust in my family was shattered, and our supposedly safe refuge had turned into a battleground. We needed to find a way out, and fast. Living in the house after that confrontation was like walking on eggshells. Sarah and I tried to keep to ourselves, spending most of our time in the guest room. I did my best to shield her from any further stress, but it was impossible to avoid Mia and Lucy entirely. Their animosity seeped into every interaction, making it clear they were far from sorry for what they had done. Sarah's new prescription arrived, but she was still on edge. She couldn't shake the fear that Mia and Lucy would strike again. I assured her I would keep the medication in a safe place, out of their reach. I hid the bottle in a lockbox I had kept from college, making sure only I knew the combination. Despite my precautions, Sarah's health continued to waver. She had difficulty sleeping and started experiencing severe anxiety. It seemed like the stress of the situation was taking a toll on her, and I felt helpless watching her struggle. Every night I held her close, whispering reassurances I hoped would soothe her. My mum, caught in the middle of it all, tried to maintain peace. She reprimanded Mia and Lucy, grounding them and cutting off their privileges, but it did little to curb their resentment. They were furious at being punished and directed all their anger at Sarah and me. One afternoon, I found Mia and Lucy huddled in the living room, whispering again. As I approached, they abruptly stopped talking and glared at me. "What now?" Mia snapped, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I don't want any more trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can't we just coexist peacefully?" Lucy rolled her eyes. "Why should we? She's ruining everything. Ever since she came here, it's been nothing but drama." "She's my wife, and she's carrying my child," I replied, my patience wearing thin. "We didn't choose this situation. We're doing our best to make it work." Mia stood up, her fists clenched. "Yeah, well, it's not working for us." I realized then that reasoning with them was futile. They saw Sarah as an intruder, and nothing I said would change their minds. I walked away, hoping to avoid another blowout. That night, as we prepared for bed, Sarah clutched her stomach, wincing in pain. Panic surged through me as I rushed to her side. "Sarah, what's wrong?" I asked, my heart pounding. It's the baby," she gasped, her face contorted with pain. We hurried to the hospital, where the doctor examined her and concluded that stress was exacerbating her condition. He prescribed bed rest and emphasized the importance of a calm, supportive environment, something that seemed impossible to achieve in our current living situation. When we returned home, I made a decision. "We need to get out of here," I told Sarah. "I'll figure something out, but we can't stay." As I started looking for a place we could afford, the atmosphere in the house grew colder. Mia and Lucy barely spoke to us, and when they did, it was with thinly veiled contempt. One morning, I found Sarah sitting on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down her face. "I can't take it anymore, Jack," she sobbed. "I feel like I'm constantly walking into a war zone. It's not good for me, and it's not good for the baby." "I know," I said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm doing everything I can to find us a new place. Just hold on a little longer." But holding on was easier said than done. One evening, I overheard Mia and Lucy plotting something new. "We should just get rid of her stuff," Mia suggested. "Make her so uncomfortable she'll leave on her own." Lucy giggled. "Yeah, let's do it tonight." Fury burned inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let them see they were getting to us. Instead, I waited until they had gone to bed and then told Sarah what I had overheard. "We need to be vigilant," I said. "They're not going to stop until we're gone." Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "What if they do something worse? What if they hurt the baby?" I squeezed her hand, trying to reassure her. "I won't let that happen. We'll be out of here soon, I promise." But even as I said the words, I felt a gnawing dread. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I didn't know how much more Sarah could take. The next day, things came to a head. Sarah and I were in the kitchen preparing lunch when Mia and Lucy burst in. Mia grabbed Sarah's plate and threw it to the floor, shattering it into pieces. "Enough!" I shouted, stepping between them. "This stops now." Mia glared at me, her eyes filled with hatred. "Make us!" she spat. Before I could react, my mom rushed in, having heard the commotion. She looked at the broken plate and then at Mia and Lucy, her face a mix of anger and despair. "What is wrong with you two?" she cried. "How can you be so cruel?" Mia shrugged. "She started it. Maybe if she wasn't so pathetic, we wouldn't have to do this." Lucy nodded in agreement, a smug smile on her face. My mum turned to me, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I don't know what's gotten into them." "It's too late for apologies," I said, my voice cold. "We're leaving." I took Sarah's hand and led her back to our room. We started packing our things, determined to get out of that toxic environment as soon as possible. I didn't know where we would go, but anywhere would be better than this battleground. As we packed, Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Where will we go, Jack?" "We'll figure it out," I said, trying to sound confident. "We have to, for us and the baby." But inside, I was terrified. Our refuge had turned into a nightmare, and our options were running out. The next morning we woke up to the sound of loud arguing downstairs. I had barely slept, haunted by the events of the previous day. Sarah looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, and I could see the strain this situation was putting on her. We needed to leave, but without a concrete plan we were stuck. I threw on some clothes and headed downstairs to find out what was going on. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw my mum standing in the kitchen, her face pale with anger. Mia and Lucy were sitting at the table, their arms crossed, looking defiant. The broken plate from yesterday had been cleaned up, but the tension in the air was palpable. "What's happening?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mum turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and frustration. "Your sisters have something to confess," Mia scoffed. "Like it matters. You're just going to blame us anyway." Mum shot her a stern look. "Tell him, Mia." With a dramatic sigh, Mia finally spoke. "Fine. We took Sarah's medication. Happy now?" I felt a cold wave of anger wash over me. "Why? Why would you do something so cruel?" Lucy shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "We didn't think it was a big deal. We just wanted her to leave." I clenched my fists, trying to control my rage. "You put Sarah and the baby at risk. Do you have any idea how serious this is?" Mia rolled her eyes. "She's fine, isn't she? You got new meds. No harm done." "No harm done," I repeated, my voice shaking. "You have no idea what you've done. Sarah has been sick, anxious, and in pain because of you." Mum stepped in, her voice trembling. "This behaviour is unacceptable. You both will face the consequences of your actions, but right now, we need to focus on making things right for Sarah and Jack." Mia and Lucy exchanged a glance, their bravado faltering. For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in their eyes, but it did little to alleviate my anger. "We can't stay here," I said, turning to my mum. "This house isn't safe for Sarah. We need to leave." Mum nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand, Jack. I'm so sorry it's come to this. I never imagined my daughters could be so heartless." Sarah joined us in the kitchen, leaning on the doorframe for support. She looked frail, but her eyes were filled with determination. "We'll leave today," she said softly. "I can't stay here another night." Mum insisted on helping us pack, apologising profusely for Mia and Lucy's behaviour. As we gathered our things, Mia and Lucy stayed out of sight, probably too ashamed to face us. Despite everything, it broke my heart to leave on such bad terms with my family, but I had to prioritise Sarah and our unborn child. We loaded our bags into the car, and Mum hugged us tightly before we left. "Please, keep in touch," she said, her voice breaking, "and let me know if there's anything I can do to help." I promised we would, though I wasn't sure how much help she could be, given the circumstances. As we drove away from the house, I glanced at Sarah, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching over to squeeze her hand. She nodded, though her eyes remained fixed on the passing scenery. "I will be, once we're away from all this." We checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, a far cry from the comfort of home, but it felt like a haven compared to the toxic environment we had just escaped. Sarah immediately lay down to rest, and I started making calls, desperate to find a more permanent solution. After what felt like hours, I finally got in touch with an old friend, Mark, who lived a few towns over. He had a spare room and was more than willing to let us stay until we got back on our feet. Relieved, I shared the news with Sarah, who managed a tired smile. "That sounds perfect, Jack, thank you." The next day we made the drive to Mark's place. He greeted us warmly, and the sight of his cosy home filled me with a sense of hope I hadn't felt in weeks. We settled into the spare room, grateful for the stability it offered. As the days passed, Sarah's health began to improve. The anxiety that had plagued her started to fade, and she was able to get the rest she desperately needed. Mark's hospitality was a balm for our weary souls, and slowly we started to feel like ourselves again. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Mark turned to me, a concerned look on his face. "So, what's the plan, Jack? Have you thought about your next steps?" I nodded, though the uncertainty still gnawed at me. "I've been looking for work. Once I find something steady, we'll start looking for our own place." Mark leaned back in his chair, thinking. "You know, I have some connections at my company. I could put in a good word for you. It's not much, but it's a start." I felt a surge of gratitude. "That would mean the world to us, Mark. Thank you." As the weeks went by, Mark's referral paid off. I landed a job, and with a steady income, Sarah and I began searching for a new home. It wasn't easy, but we were determined to build a stable life for our growing family. One afternoon, as we toured a small, cosy apartment, Sarah turned to me, her eyes sparkling with hope. "This feels right, Jack. I can see us here, raising our baby." I nodded, feeling the same sense of certainty. "Let's make it ours." We signed the lease and moved in, the weight of the past few months lifting off our shoulders. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was all that mattered. As we settled into our new home, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us here. The betrayal by my sisters, the refuge that turned into a battleground, and the kindness of friends who helped us find our way. It had been a tumultuous ride, but we had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Sarah resting her head on my shoulder, she looked up at me with a smile. "Thank you for never giving up on us, Jack." I kissed her forehead, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "We're a team, Sarah. We'll always find a way together." And in that moment, I knew we had found our refuge at last.